People wear smiles like armor, but it's in the silence where the truth screams. They say they've moved on, that they don't care, that you never really mattered. But let me ask you this. If that's true, then why do they still flinch when your name comes up? Why does their smile fade when no one's watching? Why do they laugh louder, post more, and stay busier, just to prove something? Folks, when someone has to prove they're over you, that's the clearest sign they're not. Before we dive in deep, if you've ever felt this quiet pull, this strange feeling that they still think about you but just won't admit it, hit that like button, subscribe, and stay with me. This one's going to unlock some real truths that a lot of people are afraid to say out loud. Hey folks, imagine this. You throw a stone into a calm lake. It disappears beneath the surface. But what stays? The ripples. Long after the stone is gone, those circles spread out, one after another. That's what your presence was like. You walked away. But the energy, the impact, it's still moving through their mind, quiet, subtle, constant. See, people can delete your number, unfollow your profile, even avoid places that remind them of you, but they can't mute the thoughts, because thoughts don't need a notification to show up. They arrive in silence, and they linger like perfume on an old jacket. My friends, let's break this lie once and for all. Silence doesn't mean forgetfulness. Sometimes it's a cover for obsession. It's not that they don't think about you. It's that they can't stop thinking about you. But pride is louder than honesty. Epictetus once said, "It's not events that disturb us, but our opinion about them." That's what's happening here. They're battling their own mind, spinning stories to convince themselves that your presence didn't matter. But the soul remembers what the ego tries to erase. And here's the fun part. While they're pretending not to care, every little thing starts triggering them. A song, a smell, a laugh that sounds like yours. Someone who uses a phrase you used to say. Their mind becomes a haunted museum of moments they swore didn't mean anything. Funny how the things we say we're over tend to show up in the quietest, most inconvenient places. But here's where you flip the script. You don't need to react. You don't need to explain, because the most powerful people are the ones who don't need to prove anything. You stayed calm. You walked away with grace. You didn't throw a tantrum or chase for closure, and that's exactly why you've been living rent-free in their mind ever since, not because of the drama, but because of the discipline. They think about you more than they admit, not because they want to, but because they can't help it. And the best part? You don't need to do a thing. Your energy already did the work. So let this be your reminder. You're not forgotten, you're just unspoken. And that silence? It's not the end. It's the echo of everything they still feel, but won't say. Write this in the comments if you're feeling this message. I carry quiet power. Let that be your affirmation. Let it be your anchor. And hey, don't forget to press that like button and subscribe, because what's coming next? It's going to shift everything you thought you knew about detachment, presence, and power. Stay with me. Number 1, they're quiet, but their mind is loud. The louder they laugh on the outside, the more noise they're hiding on the inside. You ever notice how the people who say they're over you are the ones who can't seem to stop reacting to your silence? My friends, don't be fooled. There's a kind of silence that's honest, peaceful, and then there's the kind that's just noise in disguise. What you're witnessing isn't detachment, it's distraction. It's avoidance dressed up like strength, and it's often the people who ghosted you, who left like it was nothing, who are now quietly haunted by what they pretend didn't matter. Imagine a theater where someone pulls the curtain shut and says, There's nothing left to see. But behind that curtain, the show's still running. That's how it works in their mind. They shut the door. They stopped texting. They stayed silent. But the thoughts, they didn't stop. If anything, they multiplied. Because silence doesn't erase a bond. It magnifies what was never resolved. And now, they're wrestling with it, alone. You might be thinking, if they still care, why aren't they saying something? Great question. It's not that they don't feel, it's that they don't want you to know they feel. Because admitting that would mean exposing the crack in their pride. It would mean letting go of the story they told themselves and everyone else, that they made the right decision. And let's be honest, folks, for some people, appearing strong is more important than actually being at peace. Pride will have them suffer silently just to avoid looking soft. But pain buried doesn't vanish. It festers. They may ask themselves, what if I was wrong? What if they really were different? What if no one else gets me the way they did? But they won't speak it, because vulnerability, that would shatter the illusion they've built. And that illusion, it's fragile. It's built on quicksand. One moment of honesty could bring the whole thing down. Marcus Aurelius said, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know the truth." They're surrounded by opinions, friends hyping them up, people telling them to move on. But none of it drowns out the truth that still whispers your name in the silence. You see, that's the part they didn't expect. They thought silence would be freedom, but all it did was remove the distractions and amplify the feelings. Now here's where it gets real. This is where most people fall back into the trap. You might feel the urge to reach out, to seek answers, to reopen a door that pride slammed shut. But don't, because the power is not in proving anything to them. The power is in witnessing the echo without becoming the noise. You don't need to shout to be remembered. You don't need to explain yourself to be understood. When you stay grounded, composed, rooted in who you are, you become the very thing they can't stop thinking about. Not because you chased, but because you didn't. And sure, it's hard. It's hard not to react when you sense they're watching your stories, circling your space, sending signals through silence. But let me tell you something. Your peace is louder than their confusion. Your restraint speaks volumes they can't match. Your calm is what exposes the storm inside them. That's the contrast. That's what keeps you on their mind. Not the past, not the drama, but the version of you that walked away without breaking. So to everyone out there wondering if the silence means you've been forgotten, let me break that lie right now. You are not forgotten. You're unspoken. And in a world full of noise, unspoken things carry the most weight. Write this in the comments to show them, show yourself and show the world. My silence speaks truth. Let it be your reminder that you don't need to perform to be powerful. You don't need to react to be remembered, because what's coming next in this journey, we're going even deeper into how your calm became their chaos, and how every move you didn't make made more impact than any word you could have said. Stay with me. Number 2, they said they moved on, but memory had other plans. The mind doesn't ask for permission to remember, it just does. They'll act like the past is behind them, like they tossed it in a box, sealed it shut, and moved forward. But here's what they don't tell you. Memory has a mind of its own. It doesn't knock. It doesn't wait. It slips in during the silence, during the in-between moments, during the scroll at 2 a.m. when they pause just a second too long on a photo that shouldn't matter anymore, but does. My friends, here's the truth. If forgetting someone was as easy as deleting a number or blocking an account, no one would be losing sleep over ghosts. But they are, because memory isn't physical, it's emotional. It lives in the nervous system, in the rhythms of your routine, in the song that plays by accident and ruins your whole mood. They think they're done with you until something small opens the door again, and boom, you're back in the room, uninvited and unforgettable. You see, they're trying to move on logically. They told themselves it's time. They told their friends you weren't right for them. Maybe they even rehearsed it like a speech in their head. But here's the kicker. Logic doesn't delete emotion. The heart doesn't follow timelines. It doesn't care how long it's been. It just knows when something once felt real, and that kind of real doesn't fade easy. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine someone trying to clean a whiteboard with a dry cloth. Sure, the surface looks clear at first, but under the right light, the writing's still there. That's how memory works. They cover it, scrub it, distract themselves with new people, new habits, even new cities. But the imprint you left, it glows in the silence. Not because you're haunting them, but because they never faced the truth fully. They skipped over healing and jumped straight into pretending. And now their mind is calling their bluff. Epictetus once said, "It is impossible for a person to begin to learn what he thinks he already knows." And that's exactly the trap they fell into. They thought they had moved on. They thought they didn't care. But the mind remembers what the heart tries to suppress. And now, those suppressed feelings are surfacing, stronger than ever. That's why the smallest thing reminds them of you. A voice, a phrase. The way someone looks at them, but doesn't really see them. It all becomes a reflection of what they once had, and didn't value enough. And maybe they won't talk about it. Maybe they won't post sad quotes or cry on social media. That's not their style. But their silence, it's not peaceful. It's filled with echoes. Because when something ends before the soul understands why, it lingers. The questions hang in the air like fog. Did I give up too soon? Did I misread who they were? Was I just afraid? These aren't questions they ask out loud. They ask them in the quietest corners of the mind, the ones no one sees, but they feel them deeply. Here's where you win by standing still. You don't need to remind them of anything. You don't need to reach out. Your evolution, your peace, your glow, your discipline, it's doing all the talking. Because nothing haunts someone more than seeing the person they doubted become the version they never expected. That's when the comparisons begin. That's when the regret creeps in. And that's when the memory goes from soft nostalgia to a sharp ache. But don't let that pull you back. Don't let it tempt you to lower your standards or revisit confusion. You're not here to be an unfinished lesson in someone else's story. You're here to become so grounded, so at peace with yourself, that no memory of you can ever be twisted. You're not someone they used to know. You're the one they still can't figure out how to forget. So let them sit with it. Let memory do what silence started. Because this journey isn't about being remembered. It's about becoming unforgettable. And when you master your response, when you no longer need closure, when your focus shifts to growth instead of validation, that's when the past becomes powerless. Now I want you to show yourself and everyone watching that you get it. Drop this in the comments. I grow forward, not backward. Let them know your memory lives on, but your life, it's moving way ahead. And what's coming next? Let's just say, it's going to hit even deeper. Stay with me. Number 3, your absence became their mirror. Sometimes the scariest thing you can give someone is space, because it forces them to face what they tried to run from. When you pulled back, they expected you to come running. They expected texts, calls, long paragraphs begging for closure or clarity. But what they got instead? Silence, stillness, distance. And that, my friends, was the last thing they were prepared for. See, most people don't understand the power of absence. They think it's just a blank space. But for someone who's used to chaos, used to being chased, used to controlling the emotional temperature of the room, your absence is a mirror, and mirrors don't lie. They just reflect. No filters, no masks, just raw, exposed truth. And that's exactly what started happening the moment you stopped showing up for them like you used to. You didn't disappear out of bitterness. You didn't go silent to manipulate. You chose peace. You chose self-respect. You chose to stop negotiating with confusion. And that decision, that energy, it hit harder than any argument ever could. Imagine a storm that loses its favorite tree to strike. The lightning doesn't know where to go anymore. That's how they felt when you stopped responding, when you stopped explaining, when you stopped dancing in the emotional drama. You see, you didn't match their chaos. You anchored your soul. And when someone is caught up in noise, stillness becomes deafening. They thought they had control of the story, that they could walk away, act unbothered, and you'd just sit in silence wondering what went wrong. But the truth is, your silence wasn't weakness. It was a reversal. The moment you stopped speaking, they started hearing everything they ignored, every kind word they overlooked, every boundary they crossed, every moment of peace you gave that they mistook as passivity. It's all there now, playing on repeat in their mind like a film reel they can't turn off. And here's the thing, the reflection hurts, because it's not just about missing you, it's about realizing who they were when they had you and who they failed to become with you. That's a heavy truth to carry. And the ego, it hates that kind of weight, so it fights back. It tries to paint you as cold, distant, fake. But the soul knows, the soul remembers, and late at night, when there's no one left to blame, it gets quiet enough to hear the truth. Seneca once said, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage." And that's what you did when you chose to live without seeking their approval. You didn't shrink to be liked. You didn't fight to be seen. You stepped back, and in doing so, you became the very standard they now measure everyone else against. Because here's what you need to understand. When you evolve in silence, your growth becomes undeniable. You become a contrast in their life. Everyone else feels loud, performative, shallow. But you were different. You were the eye in the storm, the calm in their chaos, the peace they didn't know they needed until it was gone. Now they scroll through life trying to replace that feeling. But they can't. Not because you're perfect, but because you were real. And real doesn't come around twice for those who take it for granted. And maybe they'll never say it. Maybe pride will keep the words from leaving their lips. But the reflection doesn't need words. It's in the way they pause on your posts, in the way they bring your name up casually, like they're not thinking too hard about it, when in reality, they never stopped. It's in the moments when their new relationships feel empty, and they remember how full things once felt when you were around. So what do you do now? You keep building, you keep growing, you stay on your path. Because the moment you start glowing from within, the past starts to dim behind you. You're not responsible for their reflection. You're responsible for your direction. Drop this in the comments if this hit something real in you. My absence reflects truth. Let the world see that you don't run from silence, you use it. to grow, to rise, to evolve. And if they see themselves in that reflection now, good. That's not your burden to carry. That's the lesson they have to learn. Stay with me, because what's coming next? It's about how your growth didn't just reflect something in them, it triggered something deeper. And trust me, it only gets more real from here. Number 4, they compare everyone to the peace you gave. People remember how you made them feel, especially when no one else can match it. Let's make one thing clear. Your worth was never in the noise. It was in the stillness you brought. In a world obsessed with being seen, heard, validated, you were the opposite. You didn't chase, you didn't perform, you just showed up with presence. And now they can't stop thinking about it, because as much as they try to move on, as much as they try to pretend you're just another chapter, there's one thing they can't outrun: the contrast. The truth is, they didn't notice your peace at first. They mistook it for being too calm, too quiet, maybe even too boring. But that's what happens when someone is used to chaos. They confuse stillness with emptiness. They don't know how to receive something that isn't reactive, dramatic, or controlling. So they downplayed it. They walked away from it. And now, every new connection feels louder, but emptier. Imagine walking through a market full of flashing lights and shouting vendors, and then suddenly stepping into a quiet garden. At first, that garden feels strange, too quiet, but over time, you start to notice the air is cleaner, the thoughts get clearer. That's the peace you brought to their life. And now, they're back in the noise, back in the market, and every conversation feels like someone trying to sell them something that doesn't feed their soul. They won't tell you this out loud. They might not even fully admit it to themselves. But you've become the measuring stick, the one they subconsciously compare everyone else to. Not because you were perfect, but because you were present. Because when things got tense, you stayed composed. When they pushed you away, you didn't beg. When they tested your boundaries, you didn't crumble. You moved like someone who knew their value. And that kind of energy, it stays. Marcus Aurelius said, "The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do, only what you do." That's the energy you gave, not apathy, not indifference, but self-mastery. And trust me, my friends, people remember that, because it's rare, it's magnetic, and it's impossible to replace with surface-level attention and fast validation. Now they're stuck in this strange loop. They go out, they laugh, they date, but nothing feels like it did with you. And it's not because you were trying so hard to be unforgettable. You weren't. You were just being real. That's what made you stand out. That's why the others don't compare. Because while they perform, you were consistent. While they chase attention, you carried presence. While they talk louder, you spoke less, but with more weight. Here's the part they never saw coming. The more you detached, the more you evolved, the more they remembered what peace actually felt like. And ironically, now that they're surrounded by noise again, your silence is what echoes the loudest. That's what happens when you embody Stoic strength. You leave an imprint, not by forcing it, not by trying to be remembered, but by simply living in alignment with your values. And don't get it twisted. This isn't about you being better than anyone. It's not about winning. It's about impact. Real, grounded, unforgettable impact. You brought peace without making them earn it. You brought calm in a world that feeds on chaos. And now, when they lie awake at night, replaying conversations that didn't land, laughs that felt hollow, and connections that left them empty, they remember you. So don't question your impact just because they're silent. don't doubt your value because they moved on fast. That's surface-level movement. But you hit the soul. And that kind of memory doesn't fade. It lingers. It echoes. It shapes every new interaction they have. If you're still with me, I want you to drop this in the comments to show yourself, show them, and show the world. I am the peace they now seek. Because your power was never in chasing, it was in being grounded, being still, being so aligned with your values that even in your absence, you stay unforgettable. And what's coming next? We're going deeper into what happens when your calm becomes a trigger, and how your growth turns into a mirror they can't look away from. Stay with me, because this storm is just getting started. Number 5. Your growth became the trigger they didn't expect. The hardest thing to watch is someone become everything you said they could be. After you walked away, they thought you'd fall apart, that you'd spiral, that your silence meant weakness, that your stillness was surrender. But oh, how wrong they were. Because instead of falling, you rose. Instead of chasing, you built. And now, every step you take forward is a mirror they didn't ask for, but can't stop looking into. At first, it was easy to ignore. They brushed it off. They'll come back, they thought. They always do. But days turned into weeks, and your energy didn't return. It evolved. And now, they're watching from a distance as you glow differently. Not to show off, not to make them jealous, but because you've been working, quietly, consistently, and that kind of transformation, it speaks volumes. My friends, growth is loud in silence. You don't need to post every move. You don't need to shout every win. People can feel it, and they, the ones who left, the ones who doubted, feel it the most. Not because you're throwing it in their face, but because every part of your glow reminds them of what they chose to walk away from. You were once the calm in their chaos, the listener, the stable force. But now you've become something else. You've become the person they weren't ready to grow beside. And that reflection stings. Because it's not just about you leveling up. It's about them realizing they stayed the same. Have you ever seen someone scroll past your profile only to circle back, watch a story they didn't expect to see, linger on a picture longer than they should? That's not curiosity. That's conflict. Because your presence now exposes the version of themselves they never became. The version that required maturity, vulnerability, accountability, all the things they avoided when they left. And here's what hurts them most. You didn't become this out of revenge. You didn't glow up to make a point. You did it because you refused to stay stuck. Because the pain didn't break you. It built you. You used it as fuel, as focus. You turned silence into structure, heartbreak into hunger. You became the version of yourself that doesn't chase people, because now you're chasing purpose. Seneca said, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body." And that's exactly what happened. The hard nights, the unanswered questions, the void, they didn't weaken you, they trained you. And now, you're not only harder to forget, you're harder to reach. Not because you're better, but because you're further. You've outgrown the version of yourself that needed to be chosen. And now, they're left behind, wondering if they gave up too soon. Here's the irony. They wanted freedom, and now they're stuck with regret. Because freedom without growth just leads back to the same place, the same patterns, the same mistakes. But you broke the cycle. You didn't just detach, you transformed. And that's why they keep thinking about you, not because they miss who you were, but because they now see who you've become. And you're not angry. You're not bitter. You've just moved on. And nothing is more powerful than a person who evolves without needing to prove anything. That's the energy they didn't expect. That's the storm they never saw coming. So if you've ever wondered whether your growth matters, it does. Not because they see it, but because you feel it. Because you wake up every day a little stronger, a little wiser, a little more rooted in who you are. Let this be your reminder. Growth is the quiet revenge, not to hurt anyone, but to become so whole within yourself that their absence becomes irrelevant. Drop this in the comments if this part hit your soul. I outgrew who they left. Let the world know your growth wasn't for applause. It was for alignment. It wasn't for validation. It was for you. And stay with me, because in the next part, we're diving even deeper into the silent weight of your presence and how it created a void they never knew would hurt this much. Trust me, you're not just a memory. You're the standard, and that's something they'll never admit, but never stop feeling. Number 6. The void you left is louder than you ever were. People don't notice the light until they've lived in the dark. At first, it felt like nothing changed. You were gone, sure, but the world kept spinning. They kept posting, laughing, living. It all looked the same on the outside, but little by little, something began to shift, something they never expected. It wasn't your voice they missed. It was your absence, the space you used to fill without ever needing to demand it, the calm you carried, the way your presence grounded the room like gravity. See, here's what most people don't realize. You don't have to slam the door to leave an impact. You don't have to yell, block, or make a scene. Sometimes just not being there says everything. And what you left behind wasn't noise. It was a void, a space so steady and silent, it now echoes louder than every word they've heard since. At first, they thought they'd be fine. Maybe even better without you. That's what they told themselves. That's what their friends told them. But then came the moments that couldn't be faked. The long car rides with no one to listen. The nights when no one checked in. The arguments where no one calmed the storm. That's when it hit. You weren't just a person in their life. You were the piece they didn't know they needed until it was gone. Have you ever been in a room that used to be full of laughter, and now it just feels hollow? That's what they feel now, because your absence didn't just take your attention, it took your energy, that quiet, steady, emotionally mature energy, the one that didn't compete, didn't panic, didn't manipulate. You weren't loud, but you were felt. And now that you're gone, nothing feels quite the same. And it's not that others haven't tried to fill that space. Oh, they have. They've talked louder, moved faster, offered more. But they still don't get it. They don't listen like you did. They don't sit in the silence without rushing to fill it. They don't carry that subtle strength, the one that made even chaos feel manageable. So no matter how full their life looks now, there's an emptiness that only your kind of presence filled. Marcus Aurelius said, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to think, to enjoy, to love." And you lived like that. You showed love with clarity, not confusion. You didn't demand. You gave. You didn't over-explain. You understood. And that's rare. Rare enough that now, in your absence, they're not just lonely, they're unsettled. Because here's the truth. Anyone can make noise, but very few can make someone feel safe in silence. That's what you did. That's what they lost. And now they walk through life trying to replicate that feeling, with people who don't speak their soul's language. They laugh more, but feel less. They move on, but never really move forward. And maybe they won't admit it. Maybe they'll keep pretending they're fine. But deep down, they know. They know that something is missing. And it's not just anyone, it's you. Not because you were perfect, but because you were present, intentional, calm, consistent. You brought emotional safety in a world addicted to surface-level attention. So don't ever question whether you made an impact. You did. Not because they say it, but because they feel it. And that void you left? It's a constant reminder, a shadow that follows them, not out of spite, but out of truth. Because real connection doesn't just disappear, it lingers, it teaches, it reshapes the way they experience everyone who comes after. And if you've been wondering whether it mattered, let this be your reminder. You were the anchor they didn't appreciate until the sea got rough again. Now, I want you to take this moment and turn it into a declaration. Write this in the comments. My absence speaks volumes. Say it loud. Say it for yourself. Say it for anyone who's ever underestimated your presence until it was no longer there. And stay with me, because what's next? We're going even deeper into the subtle signs you left behind that they can't hide from anymore. Not from their friends, not from themselves, and especially not from the silence. Number 7. Their friends see the truth before they do. What the heart tries to hide, the energy reveals, and the people closest to us feel it first. They said they were over it, that they've moved on, that your absence didn't shake them, and maybe at first they even believed it. They laughed louder, posted more, filled their calendar with noise and faces and distractions. But my friends, let me tell you something. Energy doesn't lie. And while they were out convincing the world they were fine, the people closest to them, the ones who truly know them, began to see through the mask. You know what happens when someone loses a real one. The kind of person who brought peace without performance, who listened without judgment, who stayed steady when everything else felt chaotic. They may pretend it doesn't matter, but the void, it changes them, quietly, subtly, in the way their voice shifts when someone mentions your name, in the way they scroll past your profile a little too slowly, in the way they laugh but it doesn't quite reach their eyes anymore. Their friends notice, they always do, because people who are really over someone don't have to prove anything. But when someone is still holding on, trying to suppress what they feel, it leaks out in every little interaction. They say your name like it's nothing, but linger just a second too long. They laugh at memories and then suddenly go quiet. They say, I don't even think about them anymore, but they're still watching your stories, still checking mutual connections, still wondering. You see, friends don't need the full story. They read the energy. And the energy right now, it's conflicted. Because while they tell the world they're fine, the truth is sitting in the room with them like a ghost, and their friends feel it. They might hear them downplay what you meant, brush off the connection, say it wasn't that deep. But they remember how different they were when you were around, how they carried themselves, how they lit up in conversation, how they seemed grounded, seen, understood. And now, that light has dimmed, that glow isn't the same. And no matter how many new people they meet, no one brings that same stillness you brought. Seneca once said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one." That's what you did. You weren't loud about your presence. You simply embodied it. And because of that, your absence now speaks louder than anything they're posting, louder than the smiles they're wearing, louder than the distractions they've surrounded themselves with. Now their friends are starting to ask silent questions. Why does no one measure up? Why do they keep bringing this person up casually like it's nothing? Why do they act fine but seem so restless lately? They may never admit it out loud. Pride's a heavy thing to carry, but the people around them can feel the truth, even when they can't say it themselves. And here's the best part. You didn't need to do anything extra to leave that impact. You didn't chase. You didn't perform. You just stayed solid, consistent, real. And that kind of energy can't be replaced. It can't be faked. It can't be rewritten with a few new memories. Because when someone has experienced presence without pressure, depth without drama, and peace without performance, everything else feels shallow. So if you've ever wondered, did my absence matter? Did they really feel it? The answer is yes. Not just them, but everyone close to them feels it too. Because you didn't just leave a relationship, you left a standard, a frequency, a truth. And truth doesn't fade. It echoes. Drop this in the comments if you feel this part in your bones. I leave presence behind. Let it be your quiet declaration. Show the world that you didn't need applause to be unforgettable. You just needed authenticity. And don't go anywhere, because next, we're going to uncover what they're really missing in silence. The one thing they took for granted the most, being understood. And that loss? It cuts deeper than they'll ever admit. Stay with me. Number 8, they miss being understood more than they'll ever admit. Being seen is common. Being understood, that's rare and unforgettable. They might have moved on to new people, started new conversations, shared laughs with new faces, but there's a different kind of silence that visits them now, the silence that follows being misunderstood. And that's where your presence still lingers. Not in the noise, not in the past, but in the space where no one sees them quite the way you did. Let's break a lie, folks. People don't miss attention. They miss recognition. They don't long for empty compliments. They ache for someone who really got them. Someone who could hear what they weren't saying. Someone who could look past the surface-level smiles and sense when something was off. That was you. Not loud, not flashy, just deeply attuned. They might not say it out loud. Pride has a way of locking the mouth when the heart is still wrestling with the truth. But trust this, they feel it. In the middle of conversations that go nowhere. In relationships that check the boxes but lack the depth. In moments when they say, "I'm fine," and nobody questions it. That's when they feel your absence the most. Because when you were around, they didn't need to explain. They didn't need to translate. You just understood. Think about it. You noticed the way their energy shifted, even when their words didn't. You caught the hesitation in their voice, the tension behind their laughter, the look in their eyes when they were pretending to be okay. You weren't just listening to their words, you were listening to their soul. And now that you're gone, they're realizing just how rare that kind of presence really is. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." And right now, their soul is tinted with regret, not just for losing you, but for losing the version of themselves they only ever felt safe becoming when they were around you. Because your understanding didn't come with judgment, it came with stillness, safety, space. Now they're surrounded by people who respond quickly, but don't really listen, who nod politely, but don't actually care, who hear the words, but miss the meaning. And that gap, that emotional emptiness, that's where your memory comes back. Uninvited, unavoidable, unshakable. You weren't just another person passing through. You were the one who made them feel seen without performing. And in today's world of short attention spans and shallow conversations, that kind of presence, that kind of energy, it's almost mythical. And maybe they walked away thinking they could find better or easier, but now they're starting to realize Depth doesn't come around twice. Understanding doesn't live on every corner, and when someone truly sees you, you never forget that feeling, but don't let that pull you back into their story. You're not here to be the one that got away just so they can come back when it's convenient. You're not here to be the reminder they had their chance. And you've evolved. You've channeled your understanding inward. You've started giving that same patience and awareness to yourself. Because here's the thing, a Stoic doesn't give their energy to those who only realize its worth in hindsight. A Stoic doesn't seek to be re-understood. They choose to grow with or without acknowledgement. That's the real power. Not in being missed, but in not needing to be. So if you've ever asked yourself, did it mean anything? Did they feel it? The answer is simple. Yes, they did, and they still do. Every time they say, "I'm fine," and no one looks deeper. Every time they open up and feel dismissed. Every time they long for someone who listens like you did, but only hear silence in return. Drop this in the comments if you've ever felt the weight of being misunderstood and the power of no longer needing to explain. I understand without being seen. Let that be your quiet truth. Show the world that your depth wasn't lost. It was simply misplaced. And now, it's being returned to you. Stay with me, because next, we're diving into the moment everything shifted. The one realization that hit them the hardest. You were their anchor. And now, they're drifting without you. You're going to want to hear this. Number 9. You were the anchor. Now, they're lost without you. An anchor doesn't stop the storm. It keeps the ship from drifting while it passes. When everything in their life felt unstable, you didn't just stand beside them, you stood still. You were the calm in their chaos, the grounding force they never knew they needed until they had it. And now, without even realizing it, they're adrift, searching for something that feels like home, but nothing does. You weren't loud, you weren't flashy, you didn't try to control their emotions or fix everything that went wrong. You just held steady. You didn't flinch when they lashed out. You didn't fold when they pulled away. You stayed composed when everything around them spun like a tornado. And that kind of presence, it doesn't disappear. It echoes, quietly, constantly, especially now. You see, most people are used to turbulence, to inconsistency. They've lived so long in emotional storms that when they finally encounter peace, it feels foreign, almost uncomfortable. That's why they didn't value you in real time. They weren't ready to receive what you gave with such ease, emotional safety. And now that you're gone, it's not just that they miss you, they miss the version of themselves they only ever accessed in your presence. The calmer version, the more open, honest, reflective version. That's what your stillness created, a mirror. And now that the mirror's gone, they're struggling to see clearly, because every interaction feels shallow. Every conversation feels reactive. Every new connection feels loud but empty. They thought walking away meant freedom, but it just revealed how much they relied on your steadiness. And while they drift, while they reach out for temporary anchors in other people, other situations, nothing sticks. Because you weren't just a chapter, you were the spine holding the story together. But here's the truth. Your job was never to be their lifeline. You didn't come into their life to carry their chaos. You came to reflect their potential. You were the anchor, but not the rescuer. And now that you've let go, they're being forced to learn what you already mastered, how to ground themselves. So if you've been wondering whether they notice your absence, trust this, they do. Not just in the quiet moments, but in every unstable interaction they now endure, without the comfort of your presence. You didn't just hold space, you held standard, and no one forgets that. Now, I want you to drop this in the comments to reclaim your power. I was the anchor, now I am the storm. Let them see what they lost, not out of revenge, but because you rose in silence and they stayed stuck in noise. And if this part struck something deep inside you, hit the like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it.